Good day. Welcome to your news at noon on Kaieteur Radio. I'm Kevin Smith. Given the current speed with which ExxonMobil is making discoveries offshore Guyana, the oil giant may very well need more than 10 FPSO vessels to offtake the resources. This was revealed by Hess Corporation's CEO John Hess at a recent energy conference. While there, Hess was reminded that the Stabroek Block partners originally intended to have 10 ships to produce and store the 11 billion barrels of oil equivalent resources for sale. With a line of sight for 6 projects, this only accounts for 4.9 billion barrels of oil equivalent resources. It therefore leaves 6.1 billion barrels of resources to be used by the remaining 4 ships envisioned. Even if the partners pursue the construction of 4 massive vessels to each offtake 1.5 billion barrels of oil each, that still leaves for consideration the 10 discoveries made by Exxon and its partners last year. Those finds have not been defined yet. Industry stakeholders have assumed that these discoveries hold over 1 billion barrels of oil. This alone will require a separate vessel or 2. Additionally, ExxonMobil has approached the Environmental Protection Agency to advance a 35 multi-well program in the Stabroek Block. This campaign could no doubt unlock more resources that may need their own vessels for storage and production as well. Several million barrels of crude oil are produced and transported daily across the world, and with it inherently brings the risk of an oil spill. Such occurrences have over the years not only damaged ecosystems, but their containment, cleanup and restoration of the environment has also cost parties billions upon billions of US dollars. There have been growing calls by Guyanese and international experts for the country to get in place adequate full coverage insurance guaranteed by the parent companies of the oil companies operating in the Stabroek Block. The EPA essentially dismissed securing such a commitment from the parent companies for the oil companies working in Guyana to provide such a form of insurance, calling such an arrangement unheard of. The EPA, in a public missive, conceded that the first development in the Stabroek Block at the Liza 1 field was in fact granted permission with the criteria of relying on self-insurance. Only recently, when the matter of full coverage insurance was raised by the media with Vice President Bharat Jagdeo with regards to the ExxonMobil-led operations in the Stabroek Block, he deferred responsibility to the EPA. He told members of the media that the EPA had been directed by the administration to get ExxonMobil Guyana, along with Hess Corporation and CNOOC, to provide a written guarantee for full coverage insurance for its operations locally. In other news, a 32-year-old police sergeant, Jermaine Semple, is on life support at the Linden Hospital complex after he was allegedly shot by his cousin, Fawaz McCrae, a 27-year-old building contractor of Central Amelius Ward, Linden, Sunday night. The incident occurred at about 21:30 at the Crown and Anchor Grill and Bar in Linden. According to investigations, Semple, who is stationed at the Tactical Services Unit, along with his brother, Dervin Semple, and cousin, Fawaz McCrae, were imbibing at a bar when a fight broke out between the brothers. During the altercation, Fawaz tried to separate the brothers, at which time Jermaine Semple turned on him, resulting in Fawaz discharging 2 rounds from his .32 pistol, one of which struck Jermaine Semple to his head. One of his siblings said, "My brother is 90% gone." Semple is breathing on a ventilator. Investigations are ongoing. In other news, the EPA has disclosed that the cost of construction to construct ExxonMobil's local headquarters has jumped from just around $50 million to $160 million, even though the design for the structure remains the same. Shadow Natural Resources Minister David Patterson, in pointing to the need for timely audits to be conducted, said the tripling of the project cost is worrying. A contract was awarded to Nabi KCL Oilfield Construction Services Guyana in 2019 for the construction of the headquarters at Ogle, According to a request for information issued by ExxonMobil, the scope of the works include the construction of 2 buildings for 250 seats, an outdoor pavilion, paving, landscaping, fill and storm drainage, site utilities, plumbing utilities, and electrical works. And with Guyana being temporarily suspended from the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, the opposition believes there is little hope for citizens to ever know the true beneficiaries of the oil blocks that have so far been awarded, as well as the 14 that are to be auctioned. When Guyana signed on to the global EITI body in 2019, it agreed, among other things, to publish a register of the beneficial owners that are involved in the exploration or production of oil, gas, or mining activities. Economic advisor to the leader of the opposition, Alson Lowe, explained recently Guyana's suspension from the EITI will mean that for the upcoming oil block auction, the country will have no idea as to the beneficial owners of the company awardees. This means that the PPP could award the oil blocks to themselves and Guyanese would be left in the dark. The government must commit to releasing all beneficial owner information for any awardees. He said the government has a prolonged history of secretly managing the oil and gas sector, as is evident in what the opposition believes is its refusal to release the audit findings of ExxonMobil's multi-billion US dollar expenses. And just before we head to a short break, let's tell you the Guyana Human Rights Association says the signing of an agreement to operationalize e-governance in Guyana without the framework legislation covering data protection being in place is reckless in the extreme. The body said that given the haste, absence of public consultation, and threats to the integrity of personal information, not to mention the seeming illegality of sole sourcing a project, it is calling for the project to be paused and submitted to Parliament. The government on Friday signed a $35 million US contract with a German-based company, Veridos Identity Solutions, for a single electronic identification system and cards that will be issued to Guyanese. Meanwhile, the GHRA said Guyana is unique in the Caribbean at present in having no electronic transactions act to displace time-consuming and stressful paper-based procedures, for example, in registering births and deaths, creating a bank account, or registering a company. The body said for a number of years, CARICOM countries have been holding serious consultations on data and privacy protection legislation covering vital matters such as terms of consent, data sharing by government agencies, and the right to be forgotten, among others. This right covers situations in which people may and may not request their information to be publicized. You're listening to Kaieteur Radio, 99.1 and 99.5 FM. This is the news at noon. We'll return after the break.
This is GHK Lal inviting you to join me weekdays from Monday to Friday on the National Outlook for commentary on a range of issues, immediately after the 12 noon and 7 p.m. newscasts on Kaieteur Radio at 99.1 FM and 99.5 FM. Looking forward to you sharing in the conversation.
Welcome back. Having received $26 million US in additional financing from the World Bank in 2020 towards the ongoing Guyana Flood Risk Management Project, the Ministry of Agriculture would now be utilizing $1.2 billion from the proceeds towards improving the drainage capacity on the east coast of the Marara at Liliendal and Ogle. The ministry on Monday signed its first set of projects for the year at $1.2 billion contract for the rehabilitation of the Liliendal and Ogle drainage catchment areas in Region 4. It is understood that this project is part of the ministry's flood risk management project, which has been ongoing since 2014. According to an abstract from the World Bank page, the objective of the flood risk management project for Guyana is to reduce the risk of flooding in the low-lying areas of East Demerara. Meanwhile, the government will be using part of its $83.3 million received from Norway under the Forest Partnership deal to purchase 3 4x4 double cab pickups. Last September, Guyana signed an agreement with the Inter-American Development Bank that manages the fund to utilize a portion to build 8 solar projects across the country. According to an advertisement, the government intends to apply part of the Forest Fund proceeds toward purchasing 3 motor vehicles. It was stated that the procurement will be done pursuant to the bank's policies by GPL. And in other news, Otis Ricardo Kaieteur, a fisherman, was charged on Monday with the murder of his reputed wife, Anisa Ishmael, who died on March 6th. Kaieteur of Hope Estate, East Coast Demerara, made his first court appearance in the Vigilance Magistrates Court before Magistrate Fabaya Azor, where the charge was read to him. He was not required to plead to the indictable charge, which alleges that on March 6th at Hope Estate, he murdered 26-year-old Anisa Ishmael, a mother of 2. Kaieteur was yesterday remanded to prison and is expected to return to court on April 25th. Ishmael was killed by Kaieteur as she was trying to leave their abusive relationship. The police revealed that Ishmael and the suspect had lived together in a common law relationship and had ongoing domestic issues. And an update, the prime suspect in the alleged murder of Kevin Jr. Small of Patrick Dam, Angois Avenue, was apprehended yesterday in an operation by police in Region 6. 34-year-old Ryan Danpat, a laborer of Smythes Village, New Amsterdam, was arrested in a hired car. He is currently at the Central Police Station assisting with investigations. Police said Danpat was told of the allegations, but he opted to remain silent. A post-mortem conducted on the body of Small revealed that he died from shock and hemorrhage compounded by an incised wound to the forearm. Police said that on Sunday, March 12th, Small, Shamar Wilson, and 2 others had gone to Caracas Dam for a swim in a trench. Shortly after, Danpat and 2 others arrived and confronted them. An argument ensued and it became physical. Kevin Small plunged into the trench to escape the fight but was pulled by Danpat, who was armed with a cutlass. He dealt Small several chops about his body. And on that note, we wrap things up with the page 7 of today's Kaieteur News, dedicated to being blunt. Investor confidence. How about Guyanese confidence? The foreign investors are concerned about press calls and renegotiation. Isn't this a right of democracy? Guyana's constitution? Isn't freedom of the press a treasured right when fighting for what is right? Are all foreign investors going to tell us what to publish next? Are foreign investors making billions from us and content with us receiving pennies? And that brings us to the end of today's News at Noon. I'm Kevin Smith. Thank you for listening.
Want value for your advertising dollar? Then place your ads on Kaieteur Radio's newscasts. Streamed live on 6 different mediums, reaching hundreds of thousands. Advertise today and watch your dollar grow. Call us on 225-8465 or 226-8210 today.
March 14th. I'm GHK Lal on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. Welcome to the National Outlook. Oil, Exxon,
Exxon's oil contract, Guyana. That's where we are again today. We know that 75% of the money coming in, the first 75% of oil revenues, have to be set aside so that Exxon's expenses, the expenses it claims to have incurred in our offshore oil operations, it has to be made good for that. 75% from the top of our oil money. Well, we have some Guyanese who are coming out and say that what that does is disguise the true cost per barrel of our oil. From last Friday's Kaieteur News, Professor Hunt, I think he was a former ambassador, C. Kenrick Hunt, says that the Exxon's contract disguises true cost of producing a barrel of oil. We don't know what's the true cost of a barrel of oil. And Exxon's expenses are not even are not disclosed at all to us. And I have a serious problem with that. But that's another conversation. So if we don't know the true cost per barrel of oil produced by Exxon, then what do we know? What do we really know? We know, yes, it's about 120,000 and 140,000 for Liza 1, and then this goes up, and it's a total of 340,000 barrels per day. Yes, yes, yes. Good, good, good. Safety considerations aside for the moment. How much is each one of those barrels costing Exxon for which you are paying, which I am paying from our oil money, the profits that doesn't come to us, that has to go to cover Exxon's expenses, some of which may be made up, some of which may be blown up, and some of which would cause a lot of us to throw up if we really were aware, fully aware of what Exxon is doing outside there and dumping in our laps as expenses. Here is what's going on. When 75% of the cost, the expenses, are taken from each barrel of oil or from this year or this lift, here is what is happening. There's another 25% that has to go forward, has to be rolled over. So this is expense farming, expense channeling from one project to another, and it goes on endlessly. If I am in that position, then you know what is going to happen. Unless I'm the most honest man in the world, honest company in the world, then you know what happens? People are going to take advantage of that. Because it's an open check. It's a blank check. It's an open book, an open door to be exploited. And I think that's what Exxon could be quite capable of doing. So one, we don't know the true cost per barrel of oil. And secondly, our profits are going further and further away from us. So instead of expenses being taken out now, and these are the profits, and we're done with that, and so now what we have coming to us is pure profit, pure gravy, as I would like to say, or as Indians might say, surwa, from curry, and you know that more than me. Instead of that, the profits are going further and further away from us because we are getting lesser and lesser now because these expenses keep hanging on and spread out and rolled over and every other concoction that Exxon can come up with to keep that pot boiling. 7 years into an oil-producing country, and this is where we are. Yet we are racing ahead to approve more projects, to produce more oil, soon to be 1 million barrels a day in, I think, 23? In about 3-4 years' time. We either wrap our arms around this oil business, this oil blessing now, or it's going to come back to hang us up by the neck. I'm GHK Lal on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. You are listening to the National Outlook.
Kaieteur Radio.
Covering Guyana from coast to coast.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Berbice 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
Rich, come on, it's no objective. But from it's good love